A UN report says species extinction rates are accelerating and goes on to say nature is declining globally at rates unprecedented in human history with grave impacts on people around the world likely. How does eating animal products contribute to species extinction?
The basic problem with animal agriculture is that it is extremely inefficient. It takes enormous quantities of grain to feed these animals. These cows and pigs and chickens, they are eating machines. They eat and eat and eat. And so, according to the National Academy of Sciences, for example, the ratio is 12 to 1. In other words, on the amount of land you could feed 12 people eating a plant-based diet, you can only feed one person eating a standard Western diet. So it takes all this land, and with water, it's even more, probably 20 to 30 to 1. And in terms of fresh water resources, in terms of petroleum, it's about 12 to 1. In terms of pollution, it's about 12 to 1. So that's the problem. It takes so much land, and so all this land, so we're cutting down forests, we're destroying habitat. We're destroying rainforest habitat, ocean habitat, river habitat, riparian habitat. It's all being destroyed. Aquifers are being sucked dry. The earth is being destroyed in order to grow huge amounts of grain, and this grain is mostly genetically engineered, with needing huge amounts of glyphosate and other toxic chemicals, which also destroy the environment. So wildlife is being completely destroyed. That's it. I mean, pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides are used that are killing birds, killing fish, killing insects. The animals are being wiped out, their habitats being destroyed. And beyond that, it's the mentality of animal agriculture. That's the key thing that I want to really emphasize with the World Peace Diet, is that animal agriculture in the outer world is destroying the earth and causing mass extinction. But the key to understand is it's the mentality. Animal agriculture injects into all of us who are raised in this society this mentality of being the superior species. So we can destroy animals and not care about it. We can destroy ecosystems and not care. We're taught basically that human beings are so superior to animals that whatever we do to them is okay, because a herding culture based on domination and exploitation and oppression of other living beings allows us and rationalizes the complete destruction of ecosystems and animals, because none of that matters, only we matter. What we're learning is that if we destroy the web of life, we're destroying ourselves. And so as we cause the extinction of species, we're causing our own extinction. Whatever we sow, we reap. So the whole idea is to question that mentality and to begin to nurture a mentality of kindness and respect for nature and for animals and for each other.
In 1860, the average age of the onset of puberty in girls was 16.6 years. In 1920, it was 14.6. In 1950, 13.1. 1980, 12.5, and in 2010, it had dropped to 10.5 years old. Similar sets of figures have been reported for boys, albeit with a delay of around a year. How does eating animal products contribute to the earlier age of the onset of puberty?
The primary way is eating estrogen, and that's primarily found in dairy products. So as I talk about in the World Peace Diet, in just one generation actually, Japan lost World War II, and in the 1950s, the United States forced Japan to open up its doors to allow the American dairies to come in and just start growing, start importing dairy products and start creating a dairy industry in Japan. So all the Japanese people had never eaten dairy. They just never had eaten dairy. So they started eating the dairy products, and in just one generation, the average age of menarche, of the first menstruation of girls, went from 16 to about 12, in just one generation. So it's because of the huge estrogen load in dairy products, and estrogen, cow estrogen and human estrogen are molecularly identical. So when we're eating dairy products, we're getting this huge unnatural load of estrogen. If we're a girl, it's going to cause all kinds of problems like early menstruation and breasts and so forth, and having babies. The potential to have babies when it should never happen, and causes later breast cancer. There's a secondary cause of all of this, which is it's understood that a lot of the chemicals that we're eating in the GMO foods, they create very small concentrations of pesticides that in our body mimic estrogen. And that can also be a factor in causing the earlier menstruation, but mainly it's the dairy industry is to blame for that.
How does eating animal products contribute to the growth of antibiotic-resistant bacteria?
Again, today it's about 90% of all antibiotics that are created by the antibiotics industry are fed to animals, not to people. It's just standard procedure, especially on commercial CAFOs, on confined animal feeding operations, to just mix antibiotics in with the feed of cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys and other animals, because it has been shown to boost weight gain. They just get fatter. With more antibiotics, the fatter they get, the heavier they get. It helps keep them alive in extremely toxic situations with lots of toxic bacteria and viruses and pathogens. So these antibiotics are mixed into the feed, and obviously the more antibiotics that are used on these animal feeding operations, the more that the bacteria are going to get stronger and be able to overcome those antibiotics. And so now our antibiotics are not working anymore, primarily because of animal agriculture.
In Chapter 7 of the World Peace Diet, what did you mean by the dairy nightmare? What did you mean by pushing cows to produce? What did you mean by the toxins in milk? And what did you mean by eggs, more domination of the feminine?
Basically, the dairy nightmare and the domination of the feminine is inherent in all animal agriculture. It's sort of epitomized in the dairy industry and in the egg industry, where you have these females just confined and their uteruses just mined basically for money, just impregnated against their will, their babies stolen, their milk stolen, their lives stolen, and then killed. And the same thing with eggs. Just, hens would normally give, like any bird, a few eggs a year. That's it. Now they're giving 200-300 eggs a year. They're kept because through breeding, through lighting, through feeding schedules, and so forth. These animals are pushed to produce. The same thing with the cows. They're pushed to produce. They're exploited. It's the exploitation of the mothering principle, the exploitation of the principle of loving and nurturing life. And so this is the nightmare. We inflict on these animals a horrific nightmare of unimaginable suffering. It's really impossible for us as human beings to imagine the horror of being born into, for example, the life of a typical egg-laying hen, where you're hyper-confined have your beak chopped off. Chopping off of the beak of a hen, it's like that's their entire connection with the world. It's full of nerves. It causes such severe pain when it happens as a little chick that a lot of the little chicks just die right on the spot from the shock. If they don't die right on the spot, then they have chronic pain from the nerves that are exposed, so that they won't peck each other's eyes out, because they're confined, usually 8 hens in a cage the size of a newspaper, and so they can't escape each other. They can never spread their wings. They're confined, even if they're in a large shed, so-called free range. They still are inside their entire lives. They're hyper-confined inside these large sheds. In any event, their eggs are stolen. Their lives are stolen. They're living in extremely stressful, toxic lives. Very often they're force molted, which means that they're starved, basically, to shock their system to get into another cycle of laying. And then they're ground up alive. All the males, of course, that are born are usually either suffocated immediately upon being born, or they're ground up alive in wood chipping machines and then fed back to the females. So the system of egg production, of dairy production, is explicitly the violence against the female of the most horrific kind imaginable. And we're not only causing that violence, we're eating that, we're feeding it to our children. All of the toxins that we're eating, we're inflicting on these animals. We're not only the pesticide, herbicide, and fungicide residues, the natural toxins in the meat, and then all what I refer to as metaphysical toxins, the terror and fear and pain of these animals. We're eating all that too. So again, the good news is that there are no nutrients we need in these foods to be healthy. There's eggs are the most concentrated glob of cholesterol on the planet. There's nothing we need to eat to be healthy in eggs or dairy, and enormous suffering, enormous toxicity concentrates in these foods.